In every one of Israel's wars, it's had a significant advantage in high-tech military equipment when facing the Arab armies, but more importantly, when facing the most sophisticated weapons systems the Russians and the Chinese can design and send to Israel's enemies. And much more so than the United States, Israel has really taken the lead in developing methods of countering the Russian weapons, because while the U.S. isn't, thank God, at war with Russia, Israel is very frequently at war with its Palestinian and other Arab neighbors. There's a wonderful book that this is based on called Weapons Wizards by Yaakov Katz and Amir Bobot, B-O-H-B-O-T. Weapons Wizards, really worth buying. And it has some wonderful stories that explain how Israel kept its technological edge. One of the best is that when Israel was forced to withdraw from the Suez Canal after the 1956 war, and then into the 60s, it needed a method of looking over the canal to see what the Egyptians were doing on their side of the canal. And the problem is that it didn't have a way of doing that. So Israel invented the drone. And the way they did that was that they literally went to FAO Schwarz, the toy store, and bought 4 toy helicopters and mounted cameras on them and sent them over across the canal to hover over Egypt and take pictures. Total cost, $825. Another wonderful story is that when Israel launched reconnaissance satellites, spy satellites, it needed very detailed analysis of the resulting photos to tell exactly where Hezbollah and Hamas were building tunnels. And the analysis that the CIA and those agencies would give is pretty cursory, because they're looking for large missiles and silos and stuff like that. But to tell where the tunnel is being built, you needed to know if a bush had been pruned or had been moved, or there was a tree that used to be there, that kind of stuff. So the Israelis actually hired a corps of autistic soldiers, autistic men, whose job was to scan the reconnaissance photographs. And because of their autism, they were able to focus extensively on the very detailed, minute elements in the photograph and tell when there had been any development from one photograph to the other. Extraordinary. Another chapter is about how Israel stayed ahead of the rest of the world in tank development. First of all, initially building tanks with thick enough armor so they would survive anti-tank missiles, which was a big problem 30 or 40 years ago. But increasingly, in recent years, Israel solved a number of key technical problems that made tanks increasingly relevant on the battlefield. One was to have a command and control system where a tank could fire accurately while it was moving ahead at full speed and didn't have to stop, move its turret, aim, and fire the way tanks had to do in World War II. And by basically combining electronic measures and lasers and all kinds of high-tech equipment, it was able to develop that kind of a fire system. Israel also developed modular armor, where a tank could have more armor when it was going into an environment with anti-tank missiles and less armor when it was not facing that danger. It also developed tanks that could go much more quickly and pack a firepower that was much more deadly. It's a fascinating book and a fascinating story of ingenuity and homespun remedies, often facing desperate situations against tall odds. Weapons Wizards. Thanks for watching.